and newsagents.
Can we give a big Macclesfield welcome to the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner? Thank you so much, Angela, for joining us. You are the modern-day Barbara Castle of the Labour Party. And as Barbara Castle very famously said, in politics, guts is all. You have guts, you have determination, and you are going to be an amazing Deputy Prime Minister of our country. We're so happy to have you.
Angela, thanks so much for inviting us on the wagon, on the Rayner wagon. And we're in Macclesfield, which kind of shows the extent of the kind of Labour offence in a way, right? Because I mean, this is as traditionally anyway as Tory seat as it gets.
It is, but, you know, Macclesfield is typical of the areas that feel let down by the Tories. They've been in 14 years. They've, you know, crashed the economy, seen their cost of living go sky high, and now they're fed up. You know, the NHS is, you know, speaking to people outside before, and they're saying that, you know, the appointments and the challenges they face for getting, you know, treatment is really dire here, and they just feel like nothing's changed with the Conservatives, and now they're ready for giving Labour a try.
How are you finding life on the road? Is it
I
fun?
love it. I do actually like it, although it can be a bit bouncy on the back seats of the bus.
You are at the very back here,
especially
like the naughty kid
over,
at
you know,
school.
Macclesfield is quite windy, and you know,
Right.
lots of hills around here. So,
Yes.
and it is a big bus, but I really enjoy being out and about, meeting people, and just really speaking to ordinary folk up and down the country.
Are you fulfilling that? I mean, it's often said, right? I don't know if you get annoyed by it, but no, you've said it yourself, haven't you, about doing the sort of John Prescott role? I mean, I did see as then that piece in The Observer about you yesterday. It said that Angela has the ability to connect with people out on the road, on the bus, without actually punching anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not. I'm not planning any of that. It's all love on the bus, and you know what? I do like speaking to people. That is, you know, as a home help, I've been a union rep, and at every job that I've done has always been, you know, looking after people and speaking to people and working with people. So it's kind of why I enjoy being out and about, and maybe that's why it comes across when I'm chatting to people and they can, you know, resonate with that, is because I do really genuinely enjoy it.
We should talk about your childcare announcements, though, the party's childcare announcement.
Yeah.
Tories are already saying the maths doesn't add up. What do you say to that?
Well, they're not really good at maths themselves at the moment with their figures. But look, you know, we believe we can through the capacity. We've got falling roles now in classrooms, so we think that we can free up 3,000 spaces so that we can have those nurseries and we can get that childcare offer. You know, the Tories promised a childcare offer and they've not had a workforce plan to deliver it. And Labour are going to deliver that. And you know, Bridget is very passionate because we know that those first few years of a child's life are the most important when you talk about social mobility, when you talk about giving people the best start. Those first couple of years are pretty critical, and it also is about people who are in work and need the support. So our free breakfast club as well will help design to wrap around childcare for people who are working.
Tories are already alighting on, I don't know if you saw it, this Emily Thornberry interview over the weekend with GB News, where she said that if Labour's policy on VAT, on private school fees, imposing it, increases the number of kids at state schools and has bigger class sizes, then so be it.
Well, I don't think that will be the case because, like I said before, we have got falling roles at the moment. Schools are actually merging because with the lower birth rates that we've got in the UK.
So Thornberry got it wrong.
And I don't believe that will be the case. And I also don't believe there'll be a mass exit of children coming back from the private sector in. You know, we've had austerity in our state system since the Tories came to power, and our school budgets have been cut and cut and cut, and the private sector haven't had that, and they've had this tax break, and you just can't continue like that. They could absorb the costs. They don't have to pass all of those costs on. That's what the Tories did to the state system. What we want to do is say, you know what, we can't give a tax break for a small percentage of those are able to go to private education. That's why we're going to deliver those 6,500 teachers into our state school
Tories
system.
are saying that Thornberry let the cat out of the bag. That
Well,
Labour doesn't care if class sizes get bigger just for ideological
Well, the Tories
reasons.
know the facts, and they know that schools are merging, and they know that there is falling roles. There's been Conservatives. I think there was one that said actually we should have a mass programme of getting people to have more children. That was their view of how we solve the problem. It's crazy stuff that they were coming out with. But
Emily misspoke. She was wrong.
But the facts are that there is falling roles and there will be capacity, and I don't believe there'll be a huge sudden influx of people coming into the state system.
I just want to talk a little bit about the debate on Friday, which you did, which lots of people were talking about. I mean, how is it? How is that? How is preparing for something like that? How do you prepare?
It's quite hard because it's 7, seven leaders, so 7 big figures that are trying to put their point across, and all have their agenda to make the point. And I just wanted to show the public, that the Tories are spent and that they haven't got a plan for the UK, and that we do have a plan, and that, I want to be the Deputy Prime Minister because I want to affect that change. I'm hungry to do it. I've spent 9 years in opposition as an MP, and the frustration for me, things have got worse and worse. So the idea of being able to be in a government that can really bring that change, that's what I wanted to get over to the public, because the Tories want you to think that nothing can change and that this is the best it's going to be and we've turned a corner, but we will never turn a corner with the chaos that we've had from them.
Got quite shouty with Penny Mordaunt, the two of you. It was quite
She
spirited.
was jabbing me. She was like proper going for me with her finger. She was proper jabbing me. But look, I wasn't going to let her get away with telling the lie on tax again. This idea that Labour's going to raise the taxes. We've been dead clear. We're not raising taxes on working people because we've got a 70-year tax high under the Conservatives, and we can't do that. We can't tax our way out of the situation. We've made specific proposals on how we will bring NHS waiting list time, how we will get the teachers in our classrooms, but we can't tax our way. We've got to grow the economy.
You did have a bit of a laugh afterwards. I mean, what were you? It seemed there was that picture of the two of you having
Yeah.
a joke.
Well, I did say to her, I thought you were going to jab me with your finger at one point.
What, physically, actually.
Yeah, because she was like proper going for
Were you
it.
surprised?
I don't know. I think her agenda was to try and land this lie that the Prime Minister had peddled in the leadership debate that he had with Keir Starmer.
Farage was obviously there as well. Farage could be quite a big figure in right-wing politics in Britain under a Labour government. I mean, how do you think Labour should deal with Farage?
Well, Farage to me is another chancer like Boris Johnson was, and we all know where that got us. You're on my bus. We had all those promises on their bus around how they were going to bring money into the NHS, how they're going to bring people's bills down. And the truth is that he's another guy that comes along, promises you the earth, and actually has got no plan on how to deliver it.
Do you think he's dangerous, Farage?
I think he's just a chancer. He's literally a chancer who wants to make people believe that he can fix everything. But the reality is that he's been part of the chaos.
Do you think he was a bit? You saw him at the weekend saying that the stuff about D-Day, it showed that Sunak wasn't proud of our culture, of our history. Some people have said that's dog whistle. I mean, do you think it's potentially dog whistle?
I think that's an unfair characterisation. He shouldn't have left the D-Day ceremony, and it shows a lack of judgment actually. And he got his fixed penalty notice as well when when Boris Johnson was given a fixed penalty notice for breaking lockdown rules. Rishi was part of that as well. So for me, it shows a clear lack of judgment and a clear lack of respect. But I wouldn't have phrased it in the way that Nigel Farage did.
Do you think is it racist?
Well, I think for me, I think it's divisive, and I think it's an unfair characterisation. You know me, I don't hold back when I think something's wrong, but I think that's completely unacceptable.
Like an British Asian Prime Minister saying he's not proud of our history, he's not proud of our culture.
Well,
isn't it incumbent on progressive politicians like yourself to actually call it out and say, you know what? No one should say that. No one should use that language.
Well, I don't think it was accurate either, and I'm very clear on that. Nigel Farage has to account for why he used that language and why he thinks that's acceptable to say it. But like I say, I think it was an absolute clear misjudgment by Rishi Sunak. It was disrespectful. He's apologised for it, but I think the people can have a referendum on whether they think Rishi Sunak is right to take our country forward in the vote on the 4th of July.
You talk about the Tories lying about tax. I mean, isn't the truth that actually both Labour and the Tories right now are not being straight and honest with people about public spending and tax? I mean, the fact is, Labour, if you're going to meet your fiscal rules, which Rachel Reeves has set, then you are going to basically have to impose public spending cuts on non-protected departments, aren't you? I mean, how comfortable with that would you be?
Well, no, we've been clear that, first of all, it's around how you can reform. So take local government, for example. The councils have had real significant cuts over this period. What we want to do, instead of competing with each other for little pots of money like they have done with Levelling Up, is actually give them longer-term sustainable funding, and the millions of pounds they've been using to try and chase after these pots is bring sustainable funding. You can end Section 21 no-fault evictions, which will bring down the bills for councils who are paying for homelessness. So there's lots of things you can do
Yeah, but
to
those are
try
little
and help.
things, aren't they?
No, because it could take Great British Energy, take the 1.5 million homes, the Green Prosperity Plan, that will bring an injection of investment into the economy, which Rachel Reeves has set out, that growing our economy is
But
how
that
we'll
could take a
pay
long
for our
time.
public
I get
services.
that, but Labour have signed up to Tory plans which at the moment would imply cuts of at least 1% or so to non-protected government departments. And I'm just asking you whether you would feel comfortable with that. Would you do that?
Labour signed up to saying we will not do what Liz Truss did, and we will not have unfunded spending commitments, because that's what crashed the economy and that's what sent bills sky high.
Can you rule
That's
out
why
spending
inflation was so high as well, which again had an impact on public finances like councils. So I don't accept that there's not things we can do immediately to alleviate the problem, but longer term, you can't tax your way out of this situation, because people are paying the highest levels of tax for 70 years.
But would you sit in a Labour cabinet, which would oversee more public spending cuts?
I absolutely believe that our plan will grow the economy.
But what if it doesn't?
It will grow the economy, and I've set that out why.
But even in the short term, but that could take a long time. It could take 3 or 4 years.
So, for example,
what about in year 1 and year 2?
In the short term, year 1, year 2, we can give councils sustainable, more longer term funding, end the competitiveness of these little pots of money, not waste billions of pounds on dodgy contracts that we've seen, that the Conservatives have done. We can build those homes, which will grow our economy, restructure business rates, which will help our high streets, which again will bring more money into the economy. Our New Deal for working people will give people better wages, which again will help our economy. So there are things I think that we're going to do in the short term that will help, but in the longer term there's things we can do, like, you know, the homes that we build, etc., and the Great British Energy, that will make a real impact in the long run.
One way you could improve public services is by raising more taxation. You're not going to do it from the three main levers of doing so: income tax and so on, VAT, national insurance. What about capital gains tax? Would Labour consider that?
Well,
something
again,
we've
said we're not going to raise taxes for working people. We've been very clear on that.
But capital gains isn't working people, is it?
We've been very clear. We are not raising those taxes.
So capital gains could happen.
We are not raising taxes for working people.
But does that include capital gains tax?
We have got no plans to raise capital gains tax.
Okay.
I have been clear. All of our current costings are all based on what our current projections are, the current situation with the changes on VAT on private schools and the changes to the non-dom tax status of the super wealthy, so that we can pay for our NHS and we can pay for our teachers in our schools.
Just wanted to ask a quick question about what's going on in Gaza. Do you worry that Labour's relationship with Muslim voters in particular has been stretched and damaged by what's happened in Gaza, by the party's initial response to it? I mean, there's all this suggestion about, particularly in certain seats, for example, even Shabana Mahmood in Birmingham Ladywood, losing support quite substantially from Muslim voters. Are you worried about that?
I think a lot of people across the UK are absolutely horrified by what we're seeing in Gaza, and people want to see that ceasefire. And I've said it many times, and I won't play politics with it. Every single MP in Parliament are unanimous in we want that ceasefire. We haven't been able to achieve that. That's why what Biden says, the intervention was so important, and we've got to internationally try and push for that. We've got to get the humanitarian aid into Gaza immediately. We've got to get that ceasefire, and we've got to get those hostages released. And that is not, you know, unique to Labour. That is a UK response, and we all feel that, but it's also an international response, and we're all desperate to get that solution.
Do you think that Netanyahu is a potential barrier to peace?
I want to see government in Israel that wants to work towards that two-state solution and peace in that region.
Do you think Netanyahu does?
Well, that's for the people of Israel to decide. You know, he's elected, he's democratically elected, but, you know, I worry that some of the language that's used at times takes us further away from that peace, and therefore the international community coming together to push for that ceasefire, to get that humanitarian aid, but the longer term goal to have a safe and secure Israel alongside a recognised Palestinian state. And a lot of people have said that, and a lot of politicians have said that internationally for a long time, and it feels at this moment in time they're further away. But I think at moments like that, you've got to redouble your efforts internationally, working with the international community to make that happen.
you used to really be associated with the left of the party in the Corbyn years, right? Do you think the party's got a bit too factional these days? Bit too one note.
You know,
maybe?
I've been in the party a very long time, and I've been called every shade of red. To be fair, it's you know, but
rosé to scarlet. To
I've been
vermilion.
called every shade of red. But you know what? The one thing that Keir has done is in 2019 we lost very badly, and we had to take a long, hard look at ourselves. And you know, we're a party that wants to govern to change Britain for the better, and Keir has changed the Labour Party, and you know, he's putting the offer out there and showing the people of this country that we have got the credible plan that will make a difference to their lives. So we're putting the country before party, and I think that's a big difference, because you can contrast that with what's happening with the Conservatives and the chaos.
Were you disappointed that Sharon Graham and Unite haven't endorsed a manifesto?
Look, you know, they'll always want more. They're a solid trade union, and they'll always want more, and you know, they can keep pushing for that. But I know the New Deal for working people will transform. No, because I used to be a union official myself, and I'll always push for more, and you know, I wouldn't expect anything less.
Everybody else did, and they didn't. And
but you know, that's you know, Sharon's representing her members, and she has a right to do that as the elected general secretary for a union.
But
and
is it perhaps because your own programme has been diluted down in terms of
I
the
dispute
work as
that.
well?
I don't dispute that. So Sharon says firing me higher. You know, Tony Woodley, Lord Woodley, who was Unite before, and Barry Gardner, both their bills that came through, we're saying the same things on it. You know, we want to end firing me higher. And
what would your message be to Unite members? I mean, after all, this is a huge union, huge backer of the Labour Party. You know, one of the big pillars of the Labour Party, not endorsing the Labour Party manifesto. I mean, that's astounding,
I would say to Unite members, look at the detail, look at the manifesto. You know, the New Deal for working people's on our website. Look at the transformation that will make rights from day one. Banning 0-hour contracts, ending fire and rehire.
Do you think Sharon Graham has got it wrong?
I think she's just pushing for more and more, and that's what you'd expect from a trade union general secretary. They'll always want more, and you know, different unions use different styles. Some do it.
Are you saying to her, we'll deliver more in government over time?
They have to push for more, but you know, I've talked about fair pay agreements in social care. I want to see that embedded, because I know that will make a real difference and will change the debate on how our social care and health works, because I've seen where you have good unionised jobs that are trained, you can actually save money in the NHS, and you get the skills that you need in the community.
Just towards the end, just want to talk a little bit about you have, you're always in the spotlight, right? You want that. You're the deputy leader of the Labour Party. You wouldn't be deputy leader if you didn't expect to be in the spotlight. But obviously you went through that experience recently where you were in the headlines day after day after day with regards to the council tax and all that. I don't want to entertain all those stories for all sorts of reasons, not least because of course we saw what the police said about it. But I just wanted to ask you, what was that like? What was that like to experience, to go through?
It was frustrating. There's been a number of times where, you know, I felt that, you know, whether it was misogyny or this, which I felt was, you know, it was difficult on a personal level, but it was frustrating for me because it was at a time when we've got a housing crisis, and all they wanted to talk about is my living arrangements before as an MP and try and make it into some smear at a time when really the government had completely failed people on housing. And I thought it was a deliberate tactic to try and stop me from being out there and speaking my mind as I do for people.
You thought it was an attempt to delegitimise you?
I think it was an attempt to clip my wings and to take the emphasis off their appalling record on housing. You know, Michael Gove was in a situation where he wasn't getting his housing reforms through his backbenchers. They wanted to end Section 21 no fault evictions. They didn't do that. They were supposed to be dealing with planning. They didn't do that. They've completely failed home ownership and renters, and I was pushing forward on that agenda, and I think it was a deliberate smear. And you know, that's a challenge because I'm not in politics. For me, I know what politics can do to change people's lives because it changed my life.
Being out there with that target on your back, as you say, it sounds like it was like a coordinated attempt basically to try and take you out of the game. That is something to experience, to go through. I'm just wondering how that felt personally.
Well, it's not very nice, but you know, I've grown up through rough and tumbles, and you know, I was a young mum at 16, and I had to, you know, prove my worth, and I had to fight really hard to, you know, get a good job, look after my son. And I think most people in this country at the moment are really struggling to pay their bills and are in a very similar situation. So you know, that's been my focus continually. Because
how much of it do you think, you said it was misogyny, how much of it was classism, do you think?
I think there's been quite a bit of classism as well. Yeah, I think misogyny and classism have been very much a theme in, you only have to see the way in which I'm described, and you see some of the trolls. I'm used to that, and I'm used to, I'm not a guy from Eton in a smart suit. I'm a girl from a council estate, and I've had to prove my worth, and that's okay. I don't mind proving it, and I'll always keep making sure that I do my homework, because I never want to let people down. I don't want them to think that working class people in this country are thick or they don't know what they're talking about. They do often know, and they budget because they have to, because times are hard for them, and so I work really hard to hopefully represent the best of people that are out there just trying to live their lives.
Just finally, how's your relationship with Keir these days? I mean, there's a lot been written about it, as you know, up and downs, I'm sure. It's just inevitable in politics or any professional relationship. Has it improved? Do you get on now?
Yeah, we don't.
Do you ever wind each other up?
Yeah, he's got good banter. He has got good bants. He's got a rubbish football team, but but he has got good bants. And, it's really constructive, because me and Keir are very different in the way we approach a problem. But our values are very much the same, and he respects me and I respect him. And because we'll look at things different and we will challenge each other, I think you get a better outcome. You don't want people around you who are all yes, yes, yes. But me and Keir work really constructively together.
If you are Deputy Prime Minister in a Labour government, which would be a massive moment, I'm sure personally, just astonishing responsibility. How do you see your role? How do you see your role in that cabinet and in that government?
I think it's about being part of the team.
But come on, what's your personal role? You're a massive figure in the Labour Party. How do you see, you must feel, you've got a very particular story, a very particular type of politics. How do you think you'll see yourself? I mean, is it like Prescott, that you're sort of like, sort of doing what the leader wants you to do, be their enforcer, keep everybody together? Or have you got your own agenda? What is it?
Well, I'm always trying to keep everybody together. That's kind of what I've always done, because I know that when we are together and we're working together, we can achieve great things, and that's always been my view on how the Labour Party should work. And I think we've got some amazing talent in our shadow cabinet, and I know that us working together, which we have been doing, we can change Britain and do a really good job of it. I've got a huge portfolio. I've got 1.5 million homes to build. I've got renters reform and protections of renters to do. I've got local government, huge area as well, and I want the New Deal for working people. So there's a lot of work for me to be getting on with as part of that cabinet if we're lucky enough to be elected.
Well, you've seen up close what it's like to lead a campaign, to try and become Prime Minister. Has that made you think, no thanks, I don't fancy doing the top job myself? Or has it made you think, actually, I wouldn't mind?
No, I would be absolutely honoured to be the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, but I meant the PM, the top one,
no,
the big job.
I would be absolutely honoured. I mean, to take the girl from a council estate who were told she'd never amount to anything, to give me the opportunity to roll up my sleeves and to make that change as a Deputy Prime Minister in the country, it would be like a dream come true. And then I know that's when the work starts, but I've seen what the Tories have done like the last 9 years. I've seen how dreadful they've been, so I know that we could do a better job.
You don't ever fancy the top job though?
No.
Never?
No.
Never?
No, never. I think Keir will be a fantastic... I know that Keir will be a fantastic Prime Minister. And what we've had, this self-indulgence, this putting themselves and the party before country, that is not Keir. Keir is absolutely focused on making sure we can make that change. And you get that. Even everyone who speaks to him must see what I see. And that's there's a guy there who wants to do his best by the country. And I will be absolutely honoured to be his Deputy Prime Minister and to help out with that.
Can we come back on the bus sometime, Angela? Is that
You're
all right?
Welcome anytime on my bus.
Well, we will take you up on that. Angela Rayner, thanks so much. Thanks for coming on the News Agents.
Thank you.
Well, it was just after around 8 o'clock last night where most of us were sort of settling down after a busy weekend, expecting another turbulent UK election week ahead, when the news hit from France, no less, that Emmanuel Macron was calling a snap general election. Clearly, he's looked across the pond at what Rishi Sunak's done and thought, I'll be having me one of those, thank you. And I guess you could say that at a first glance, the reason he's done that is because the populist parties were making big gains across the continent in the EU elections that were held over the weekend. And a lot of people this morning are calling this a poker game on Macron's behalf, because he is essentially saying, I'm dissolving the National Assembly, i.e. the Parliament, we're going to have parliamentary elections. This does not affect him. He will remain as the president until 2027. But the most, I think, intelligent, thoughtful analysis of this I've heard is that what he did last night, and it's an election that will happen very quickly, June the 30th, and then the second round, July the 7th. What he did last night is not about the now. It's actually about the presidential elections of 2027. And essentially he's saying, I will give up Parliament if I have to, even to these sort of abhorred far-right parties, the Rassemblement National. I will let them into power if it means that they make their own mistakes now and not at a more profound presidential level in a few years' time. And he sort of turned round to the French public and essentially said, right, you've got to show us where you stand now, because you've got the Rassemblement National, this is the party of Marine Le Pen, the hard right, as an insurgency. They're sort of carping from the outside like a whinging teenager. And Macron's saying, put up or shut up. Show us if you have any policies. Show us if you can make government work. Don't just stand there criticising, pretending to have the answers when your policies don't stand up to scrutiny. So essentially he's taking it to the French public now and saying, you get to vote in parliamentary elections in the next 3 weeks, and either the French will return to power Gabriel Attal, that's Macron's own party prime minister, or you could see the unthinkable. You could see essentially Macron's party ousted and Jordan Bardella, who's this very young, very charismatic, sort of hard right figure in Marine Le Pen's party, become the prime minister. And at that point, I guess he's saying, right, let's see how that goes for you. So it is a gamble. It's a big gamble. I think many people expected Macron to hold the election sometime before December because, quite frankly, he's now left with only 1 in 8 legislators of his own party, which means he can't really rely on getting a lot of the legislation passed. He's just pulled the tablecloth from the table with all the crockery on it and said, right, let's see which way France wants to vote. And I guess he's partly reckoning that people vote in a protest way for the European elections where they're not that invested, but they vote in a much more conservative, small c way when it's actually about their own country and local elections. He, of course, can't stand for president again after 2027. He could stand in sort of several years' time, but he will have then had his 2 consecutive terms. So in a way, I guess he's making the case for a centre government for France for the next decade if he takes this risk now. Well, joining us now is Catherine Fieschi. She's a research fellow at the European University Institute. And Catherine, I was listening to the French radio this morning. They're all calling it a poker game. I mean, it is a proper gamble, this, isn't it?
This is a huge gamble that he's taken. And we know that Macron likes to do these things. He is well known for this kind of coup, if you like. But it's also something that is quite characteristic of French presidents in some respects. They dissolve the assembly. They throw their prime minister under the bus. This is something that de Gaulle did. It's something that Chirac did. So it is a huge gamble. I think it's a very risky game that he's playing. But at the same time, it's not terribly exceptional in the context of French politics.
And the end game, I guess you could say, is not what happens now, but whether he saves the next presidency in 2027. In other words, he's trying to force Marine Le Pen's party into a place where they can't just be the insurgent outsider. They've got to be the insider who's tried and failed. Is that what he wants to see now?
I think that's exactly it, right? He is basically calling their bluff. They've got 88 MPs in the French National Assembly. And their tactic has been to essentially criticize what he's done, what his various governments have done, and actually not say terribly much. They've been kind of cruising on Macron's lack of popularity. So by doing this, what Macron has done is really created a situation whereby they're going to have to be confronted with the reality of power. They're going to have to be confronted with the contradictions inside their proposed program. Basically, they're going to have to prove that they are a party that is capable of governing. His gamble is that they won't be.
So if Jordan Bardella, the leader of the far-right party, gets into power, that won't be a mistake? I mean, that's what he wants, is it?
I mean, in some ways, I think Macron, he does want two things. He wants to test the waters to see whether the momentum and the dynamic that we've seen, characterize the Rassemblement National and Bardella over the past couple of years, whether that actually stands the test of an important national level election rather than a European Parliament election where people have a tendency to potentially protest vote a little bit more. Yeah. So I think there is a test there. Will they do as well as 30%? He's probably crossing fingers that they don't. But I also do think that he thinks that no matter what, they will not get a sufficient majority. Therefore, they will have a very difficult time governing, pretty much like his party has had over the past 2 years, lacking an absolute majority, and that therefore they will discredit themselves over the course of the next 3 years, and by 2027 they won't look like such a safe option for the presidentials.
Give us your read across for the rest of Europe from these sort of EU elections now, because I guess the top line is the far-right parties are doing very well across Europe. That's not entirely true, is it?
I think we have to make some distinctions. There are some far-right parties that are doing extremely well. Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy did even better than expected yesterday. She's flirting with 29%. The Polish PIS...
This is the Law and Justice Party. The
Law and Justice Party.
Right.
Exactly. So they're definitely doing well. Marine Le Pen's party is doing well. But there were some disappointments. The Dutch PVV, for example, did a lot less well than they did 6 months ago in their elections. The Italian League also did much less well. So I think that it's a checkered picture. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is what kind of right, what kind of radical right is doing well? And I think it is the radical right that wants to change Europe from the inside, that really wants to find a path to sovereignism, nationalism, through the European institutions by changing them, rather than the right that is, proning exit from Europe or destruction from Europe.
So that leads me on to, I guess, the biggest question of all, the last question, which is, how do centrist governments or centrist parties deal with their right flank or the far right or the hard right? Because I think we've seen in this country, in the UK, David Cameron, for example, try and lean into parties like UKIP by offering the Brexit referendum, by changing his parliamentary party in the European Parliament. And then we look at somebody like Macron who said, no, I'm not going to play with you. I'm just going to be sort of hardball. I don't know if either of those two options work. I mean, what is your sense?
So my sense is that the Macron option isn't terribly effective, because what he's done over the past 7 years of being in power is he has turned them into basically the only credible opposition. He has repeatedly said it's a choice between me and them. It's a choice between democracy and fascism. He's been, extremely explicit. And to some extent, he's now in a situation where he would need to make alliances. His party would need to make alliances. But in many respects, he's kind of destroyed any potential alliance partner, destroyed their credibility, because he has focused in on the Rassemblement National just so exclusively. On the other hand, I think that when, the other option, which is to lean in, essentially doesn't work terribly well either, because what you're doing is you're legitimizing certain policy positions. And we can see this in France even, where the center right has gone further and further right on the European Green Deal, for example, on migration issues. They have, in many respects, become indistinguishable from the Rassemblement National. But the fact is that when it comes to election time, people will vote for the original rather than the copy, if you like. Yeah. And they will vote for the hard right rather than those who are pretending. So it's a very difficult choice to make. I would argue, though, that in terms of the center right in Europe, what we've seen over the past few years is that all of the center-right parties have moved further to the right. And that, to some extent, gives us a clue as to the fact that European-level politics are going to be more conservative, more right-wing, and that there are some areas like migration, like rule of law, like the Green Deal, that are going to be a lot trickier to deal with as a result.
Catherine Fieschi, thank you so much. It was really fascinating.
Pleasure.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.